The rain on Gotham's skyline wasn't a cleanse, it was a smear, turning the lights below into weeping sores of gold and neon. I watched it from the window of my rented coffin, a room with a bed, a kettle, and my past on the wall in the form of neatly hung weapons. Alfred Sterling, that's the name I use now. The man I was retired in a blaze of gunfire and regret 5 years ago. They pulled me out of retirement for this, said Gotham was bleeding out. A new gang, the Masquerade, was turning the city into a theater of cruelty. My orders were simple: watch, listen, report, do not engage. They whispered about another player in the game, a vigilante. If he got close, my authorization changed. I was to remove him. I tried to call my daughter, Amelia. The phone just rang into that vast, silent void between us. I left a message that felt as empty as the room. "Amelia, it's your father. I'm back in Gotham, briefly. Please call me when you can." The silence that followed was my answer. The night was a cold, wet fist. I stepped out, the smell of ozone and decay filling my lungs, and I stopped. My motorcycle was gone. The thick chain I'd used was cut, the ends lying on the slick asphalt like a dead serpent. A hot, childish fury burned in my throat. A petty crime, but it felt like the city's personal greeting. "I truly have missed this place," I whispered to the darkness, the sarcasm a thin shield. My first sight of the Masquerade was at the Dixon docks. From my perch on a rusted crane, I watched through my scope. They moved with a silence that was more frightening than any war cry. Men in immaculate gray suits and blank, glossy white masks. They were loading crates, not the usual contraband, but strange hexagonal containers made of a dull, non-reflective metal. A dock worker, old and tired, made the mistake of protest. One of the Masquerade, a giant with shoulders like a bull, didn't speak. He simply turned and drove the butt of his pistol into the man's temple. The crack was distant, but I felt it in my own jaw. Efficiency without emotion, that's what scared me. Then he appeared. A shadow solidified on top of a shipping container. He dropped, a black comet, landing with a sound that was more impact than noise. He wasn't dressed like the heroes in the comic books Amelia used to read. His armor was all angles and hard planes, a matte black that drank the scant light, and his helmet, it was the snarling visage of a wolf, a creature of night and teeth, forged from nightmares and steel. He didn't announce himself, he just began. It was the most brutal, beautiful violence I'd ever witnessed. He wasn't fighting 20 men. He was dismantling one single organism with 20 limbs. A kick shattered a knee. A palm strike collapsed a throat. He moved like water, flowing around their attacks, using their momentum to break them. One raised a shotgun. The wolf was already behind him, twisting the weapon up and driving the man's own elbow into his ribs. I heard the gasp even from my distance. He was an idealist. His blows were crippling, agonizing, but meticulously calibrated. He wanted them broken, not dead. Remarkable, I breathed, a reluctant awe souring in my stomach, and utterly, catastrophically reckless. He finished them, a field of groaning suits around the silent crates. He paused, a statue of vengeance, then placed a device on one container. A low hum vibrated the air. He was scanning it. My training screamed. A true professional secures the perimeter. I panned my scope and saw them. 2 shooters, now 3, repositioning on the rooftops of adjacent warehouses. They had a clean crossfire. The wolf, absorbed in his data, was a perfect target. "Do not engage." The order was iron in my mind, but another order, older, written in the blood of comrades I'd failed, shouted louder. I exhaled, lined up the lead shooter, and fired. My round was a non-lethal kinetic pulse. It struck the man in the chest, knocking him back and scattering his aim. The wolf's head snapped up, not toward the shooter, toward me.
Through the darkness and rain, I felt his gaze lock on to my position. He'd known I was there all along. He tapped his belt. Every light within a block radius died, plunging the docks into an abyss. My thermal scope flared to life just in time to see him vanish, and the 3 shooters were now writhing on the rooftops, entangled in strands of a black web-like substance. He'd used my intervention as a diversion. He'd known about the snipers. He'd laid a counter-trap. As I packed my rifle, the cold knot in my gut tightened. This wasn't a vigilante. This was a predator, a brilliant, irrepressible predator, and my mission had just become a tangled web. Gotham wasn't just burning. A wolf was now hunting in the ashes, and I needed to find him before his war consumed everything, including what was left of my shattered conscience.
The rhythmic thud, thud, thud of my fists against the heavy bag was the only prayer I knew. Each impact was a word in a liturgy of rage. Croc's gem smelled of stale sweat, rust, and desperation, the true perfume of Gotham. I came here to feel solid, to remind myself I was more than a ghost than a machine. But the memories always leaked through. The Gotham Zoo, the sound of children laughing. My father, Dr. Thorne, his hand warm on my shoulder as I showed him my model bridge. "It's formidable, Cassian," he'd said, his kind eyes troubled. "But is intimidation what a bridge should be? Shouldn't it offer a way across, not a threat?" He was an architect who believed in building people up, not frightening them down. I was so proud of my bat-wing spires. He saw a wall. Thud. The gunshot, a single ugly punctuation to a sunny day. Thud. The screams. Thud. His face, calm and fierce, filling the doorway of the bat house before he slammed it shut, sealing my friend Leo and me in pungent darkness. The last look of my father. My final punch tore through the leather. Sand erupted, a tawny waterfall onto the scarred floor. The sudden silence was deafening. "You know, for a structural consultant, you're hell on structures." The voice was a gravelly rumble. Cale Croc Rourke stood with his arms crossed, a faint smile on his broad face. No pet crocodile, just a man who'd built a sanctuary with his own hands. "Bag's 80, my Zan is another 50. "The sand was included," I grunted, pulling off my gloves. "The meditation required to clean it up isn't. You coming to poker? Leo's in town. Eddie's got a new riddle. Harvey's trying to be mayor as something. Selena sent a carving from Cairo." His smile faded. "This city's cracking, Cass. These masquerade freaks, it's like they're not even after money. They just want to break things. Town hall meetings tonight. You should be there." Someone's got to do something. The phrase was my father's ghost whispering in my ear. I'd built myself into a weapon because of it. Cale said it like a man planning to stand his ground brick by brick. "I've got work," I said, turning for the door. "This is your home too, Cassian," he called after me, his voice echoing in the cavern of iron. "You can't just be a ghost. Fight for it." The door swung shut, but his words stuck in my chest like a splinter. Home. I had bunkers, arsenals, safe houses. Did I have a home, or was I just another fracture in the city's foundation? That night I watched from a rooftop as Mayor Gillen tried to rally a terrified city. My mother, Dr. Lynn Thorne, sat in the front row, a pillar of calm. A trauma surgeon, now deputy mayor. She was the healing hand my father believed in, and I was the shattered bone, watching from the shadows. The masquerade didn't come through the doors. They rose from below. A section of the ornate floor near the stage vaporized in a cloud of splinters and dust. Men in gray and white poured out like ants from a disturbed nest. The screams were a physical wave of fear. Gillen, to his credit, stood his ground. "Look at me," he roared. "You want to fight? It's here." The lead enforcer, the bull from the docks, raised a weapon. I was already moving. I'd pre-placed sonic disruptors in the old building's ductwork, not to destroy, to disorient. I triggered them as I rappelled down the marble facade, crashing through a rose window. The disruptors emitted a frequency that turned the air to jelly. The masquerade men staggered, clutching their helmets. I landed between the bull and Gillen, my armored bulk a wall. "Stay behind me," I growled to Officer Barbara Blaine, who'd drawn her sidearm, her eyes wide but her hands steady. "Do not open these doors." Then I turned to the chaos. They were disoriented, but not helpless. I became the storm. A nerve cluster strike here, a joint lock there. I used their own confusion, their own stumbling momentum. The bull shook off the effects fast, swinging a monomolecular filament whip. It sliced through a marble column like butter. I ducked, feeling the wind of its passing, and drove my shoulder into his chest. The air left him in a whoosh. I grabbed his wrist, twisted, and heard the gratifying pop of a dislocation. "You're dead," he choked, his mask cracked, one furious eye glaring at me. "Your payments are routed through Janus Holdings," I rasped, my voice modulator a metallic snarl. Data from the dock scan scrolled behind my eyes. "The trail drowns in a Cypriot bank. You're a gun for hire. Who's holding the purse?" He spat on my visor. I dropped him with a precise strike to the brachial plexus. The rest were retreating, dragging their wounded back into the hole. I let them go. Tiny adhesive trackers were on 3 of them, transmitting faint pulsing signals. Let them lead me to the heart. As the last one vanished, a figure dropped from the shattered balcony. It was the man from the crane. He landed in a crouch, a compact, menacing shotgun already aimed at my center mass. It whirred, charging with a sound like a nest of angry hornets. "That," he said, his accent crisp, cold British, "is the sound of a professional who dislikes amateur theatricals. You've just compromised a layered intelligence operation, you colossal idiot." I didn't flinch. "You had 3 shooters on the north and east roofs. Your layered intelligence was a heartbeat from a mortician's report." His sharp blue eyes, visible over the sights, narrowed. They were contained. My way was faster. I took a step. The gun held steady. "You're not police. Private intelligence? A ghost for a 3-letter agency? Irrelevant. You're done. This circus ends tonight." I tapped a sequencer on my belt. The graphene line anchored to the roof above retracted violently, yanking me up and backwards through the broken window. As I was hauled into the night, I saw his expression. Not anger, but a flash of pure, frustrated calculation. He was good, exceptionally good, and he was in my way. But if he was hunting the Masquerade, our paths were destined to cross again, and next time I'd be the one asking the questions. The tracker signals pulsed in my ear, 3 trails leading into the city's veins. The hunt was on, and a new player had just made the game infinitely more dangerous.
The safe house felt more like a cage than ever. The frustration was a live wire under my skin. I sat before the humming secure terminal, a cold cup of Earl Grey turning to poison in my stomach. "Sterling reporting," I said, the words flat. "The Vigilante, designate Wolf, engaged the Masquerade at City Hall. He is formidably competent. He neutralized the threat, preserved the principal asset, and extracted financial data from a primary enforcer. He also identified and eliminated 3 peripheral hostiles I had under observation." The encrypted line hissed with empty static for a long moment. Control's voice, always filtered, always devoid of inflection, finally came through. "You intervened." It was a tactical evaluation. The mayor was milliseconds from execution. The Vigilante's methodology, while flamboyant, achieved the objective and yielded actionable intelligence. My cover remains intact. Another pause. I could feel the disapproval like a drop in pressure. Revised assessment of the Vigilante. A Tier 1 asset or threat, depending on alignment. Tactical genius, physical specimen, equipped with bleeding-edge, bespoke technology. This is not a brawler. This is a surgically trained, self-funded Black Ops unit of 1. Psych profile indicates a profound trauma response need for control, likely a childhood critical incident. He's made this city his personal battleground. Your new priority is positive identification and full psychological profile. The Masquerade is secondary. We need to know who he is, his backing, and his endgame. Containment protocol is authorized if he impedes primary objectives. Understood. The line died. Containment protocol, a sterile term for a violent end. The thought sat like a stone in my gut. He was a rogue variable, a danger to orderly process. But he'd also saved lives, and his question about Janus Holdings, that was a thread my own people had missed, a thread that led into very dark corners. The next 2 days were a blur of digital sleuthing and physical pursuit. The wolf was a phantom. No patterns, no paper trail, no social footprint. He used Gotham's forgotten places, the derelict subway spur, the sealed aqueducts, the skeletal remains of failed urban projects. He was a ghost in the machine. but even ghosts have habits. He visited his mother. Tracking him to a quiet brownstone in the Coventry district was an exercise in extreme patience. He was paranoid, using anti-surveillance routes, dead drops, false stops. But every third night, like a pilgrim, he went to that door. From a rented room across the street, I watched through a long lens. Dr. Lynn Thorne answered. The stern, composed mask of the deputy mayor fell away, replaced by the raw, relieved smile of a mother. She pulled him inside. No armor, no mask, just Cassian Thorne, her son. Cassian Thorne. The name opened doors. Son of Heiress and Lynn Thorne. Heiress, a visionary architect, murdered in the Gotham Zoo tragedy 8 years ago. Lynn, a renowned surgeon. Cassian, a bright student, then a period of angry withdrawal. He left Gotham, studied abroad, structural engineering, biochemistry, forensic psychology, a curriculum that looked like a blueprint for a one-man war. He returned, working as a consultant for various firms, a name on a roster who never attended meetings. The family wasn't wealthy, but Heiress Thorne's life insurance policy was substantial, enough to fund an arsenal. He wasn't a corporate weapon. He was a self-created phenomenon, forged in a single moment of loss. My professional respect warred with a pang of profound pity. A self-made monster is the most terrifying kind. No chain of command, no off-switch. I needed confirmation. I needed to see the beast in its lair. It took a week to find one. He didn't use sewers near his strikes. He used the city's arrogance. The penthouse floors of the new, gleaming towers in the Diamond District, purchased by anonymous LLCs and left empty. Hollow investments for hollow wealth. Perfect for a ghost. Breaching the Apex Tower penthouse was disturbingly simple. His digital fortifications were impressive, but the physical security was meant for common thieves. The space inside stole my breath. It was vast, cold, all polished concrete and monolithic glass overlooking the city's glittering cancer. This wasn't a home. It was a cathedral to vengeance. Workbenches gleamed, littered with tools and components for devices I couldn't name. Schematics for molecular armor weave were holographically displayed. And on a central stand, the suit. The wolf-maw helmet seemed to breathe in the low light, promising silent, final violence. The private elevator chimed. He was home. I slipped into the shadows behind a structural pillar, drawing my pistol. A neural disruptor round. Non-lethal, but it would feel like a brain aneurysm. He entered, not in the suit, but in dark clothes, hair damp from a shower. He went straight to a holographic terminal, his back to me, and began manipulating complex data strands, the Janus Holdings network. He was deep in the puzzle. "Quite the airy," I said, stepping out, my weapon aimed at his spine. "Hiding in the hollow teeth of the beast. You know these places because you helped design their security. The game is over, Mr. Thorne." He didn't startle. He didn't turn. His hands froze above the hologram. "Alfred Sterling," he said, his voice calm, almost bored. "Ex-SIS, detached duties. Currently a contract asset for an organization that likely doesn't officially exist. You have a daughter, Amelia. You haven't seen her in 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days. You're here because the Masquerade is a probe for something called Caloscope, and your employers are terrified." The chill that ran down my spine had nothing to do with the room's climate control. He hadn't just identified me, he'd torn my life open. "I'm shutting you down," I said, forcing steel into my voice. "Hand over the data and walk away. You're not a murderer. I've watched you work. Don't make me prove that theory wrong." He finally turned. His eyes held no fear, only a glacial, hyper-focused intensity. "You're correct, Mr. Sterling. I don't kill." His thumb moved on his wrist. The floor-to-ceiling windows behind me instantly opaqued to absolute black, plunging the penthouse into perfect darkness. My ocular implant switched to thermal. He was gone from the terminal. A voice hissed my ear from inches away. "But I am exceptionally proficient at making people regret being alive." I spun, firing. The round sparked against empty concrete.
Something small and sharp struck my neck, a microdart, not poison, a localized EMP. My implant flickered, died, rebooting. In the 2 seconds of blindness, I heard movement, the whisper of cloth. When my sight returned, I saw him astride my stolen motorcycle, parked arrogantly in the center of the vast room. The wolf-maw helmet was back on. "You're not the only one who follows people, Mr. Sterling," the wolf's synthesized growl echoed. "Tell your masters Janus is a subsidiary of Kaleidoscope, and tell the wolf is coming to shatter their glass world." He revved the engine and aimed the bike at the monolithic window. A focused plasma emitter on the front flared, and the unbreakable glass crystallized and exploded outward in a shower of diamonds. He shot into the night, 40 stories above the street. I rushed to the jagged edge, the wind screaming past. He wasn't falling. Wing-like veins extended from the bike's sides, and it banked sharply, vanishing into the forest of skyscrapers. I stood amidst the glittering ruin, the city's breath howling through the hole. He'd outmaneuvered me, outthought me, and left me with a name that turned my blood to ice. Kaleidoscope, a myth from the darkest briefings, a ghost story for spies. And Cassian Thorne, the boy who lost his father, had just declared war on it. The orders in my head said contain. The soldier in my heart saw a weapon, the only one perhaps sharp enough for the coming fight. The drum beat of my headache was now a war drum, and the battle lines were drawn not in the streets, but in the shadows between duty and doom.
The name Kaleidoscope hung in the air of my safe house like a toxic gas. I'd heard whispers, a consortium, a network, not a single entity. They didn't deal in crime, they dealt in chaos as a commodity. They toppled governments not with coups, but by turning a nation's own fears against it. The Masquerade was their instrument here, and Cassian Thorne, the wolf, had scratched their paint. I had to warn Control. The secure terminal glowed with sterile light. "Sterling, the Vigilante's lead checks out. The Masquerade is a local asset of Kaleidoscope. Their leader here is likely a facilitator, codenamed the Curator. The Vigilante knows this. He is actively hunting them. He is motivated." The pause was longer than usual. "Your assessment of his capability against such a target?" "Suicidal," I said bluntly, "but potentially disruptive. He is a high-velocity projectile with no guidance system. He could hit the target, or he could blow a hole in the side of the city. He has identified my affiliation and has counter-surveillance capabilities beyond Ugu. New priority, the Curator. Use the Vigilante. Let him flush the target, then acquire the target for us. The Vigilante is expendable in this action. Do you understand?" I understood. They wanted me to use Thorne as bait and a blunt instrument, then sweep up the pieces, leaving him broken or dead. Understood. "And, Sterling, your daughter, Amelia. Her current residence is 22B Greystone Apartments, Bristol. We've ensured her safety is monitored. For now." The line went dead. The threat was as clear as the electronic silence that followed. Do your job, or her safety becomes conditional. The stone in my gut turned to lead. Meanwhile, Cassian wasn't waiting. The trackers I'd let him plant led to a meatpacking plant turned artisanal nightclub, owned by a shell within a shell. He hit it at 3 a.m. I watched from a rooftop, providing overwatch he didn't know he had. He was a tempest of controlled violence, but the Masquerade was ready this time. They had shock troopers and heavier armor, and their tactics were adapting. They funneled him into a kill zone. I saw the tripwires too late. "Thorne, fall back!" I barked into a short-range comm frequency I deduced he might monitor. "It's a funnel." He hesitated for a split second. It saved his life. The concussive wave knocked him through a wall. I provided covering fire with my rifle, tagging 2 advancing troopers with electro-pulse rounds. He extracted himself, a blur of black, and vanished into the city's underbelly. He didn't thank me, but he didn't shoot at me either. Progress. He needed a different approach. He went to his friends. I listened from a van down the street as he met them in the back room of a bar called The Last Call. His old crew. Leo, the mechanic with a heart too big for Gotham.
Edward, the tech genius, whose mind was a hall of mirrors. Harvey, the ambitious assisting DA with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. And Cale, who just looked disappointed. "You're the wolf?" Leo's voice was full of hurt. "All this time? We thought you were, I don't know, working through your stuff, man." "I am working through it." Cassian's voice was low, strained. "This is how. The people who killed my father, they're part of something bigger. It's called Kaleidoscope. The Masquerade are their foot soldiers. They're not robbing banks. They're collecting something. Data, artifacts, people. I don't know what for." "And you're going to punch it?" Harvey asked, the politician's skepticism sharp. "Cassian, this sounds like a spy novel. You need evidence. You need the system." "The system is infected, Harvey," Cassian's control snapped. "The Curator, their man here, he's not in some bunker. He's in a penthouse, at a gallery opening, drinking champagne with the people who are supposed to protect us." Edward, who had been quiet, tracing patterns on condensation on his glass, spoke up. "The masks they wear. I've been analyzing the fragments you brought me. The circuitry. It's not just for communication. It's a neural lace. It feeds them data, yes, but it also suggests. It dampens fear, amplifies aggression, provides tactical overlays. It's a performance-enhancing drug for the psyche. They're not just wearing masks, they're being rewired by them." The room went cold. Cale broke the silence. "So what's the plan, genius? You can't do this alone. Not anymore." Cassian was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "The Curator is hosting a private acquisition party tomorrow night for a new exhibit at the old Gotham Natural History Museum. Black tie, exclusive guest list. I need to get in." Harvey scoffed. "Impossible. Security will be a fortress." A slow smile touched Edward's lips. "Not if you're part of the exhibit." He explained. The museum's new wing, funded by an anonymous donor, featured a state-of-the-art digital security system, one he'd helped design the beta firmware for, a system with a back door he'd left just in case. "He can get you in through the environmental controls, but you'll have 10 minutes, maybe 12, before the anomaly is logged." It was a plan, a terrible, risky plan, and I knew I had to be there. Not to stop Cassian, to watch the Curator, to see who he was, who he met with, to fulfill my own orders. The night of the gala, the museum was a jewel box of light in the dark. Limousines disgorged the city's elite. I was among them, in a tailored tuxedo, a guest under a fabricated identity for a minor European foundation. I slipped through the crowd, a ghost in plain sight. And then I saw him, the Curator. He held court in the Hall of Minerals, not a monstrous figure, but a man of elegant, ageless grace. Silas Manderly, a philanthropist, an art collector, a whisper in high society. He wore a suit that cost more than my annual pension, and a smile that was a masterpiece in benign condescension. He wasn't wearing a mask. He was the mask. I saw Cassian, too, not as the wolf, but as a waiter moving with silent efficiency that was itself a disguise. Our eyes met across the room. He gave a barely perceptible nod. The game was in play. The exhibit was unveiled. Not a painting or a sculpture. It was a massive fluid screen showing a swirling, mesmerizing pattern of light and sound, a live feed of data from the Masquerade masks across the city. Crime rates, fear indices, stock fluctuations in security companies, social media sentiment. It was a masterpiece of social corrosion, and the elite crowd applauded politely, sipping champagne, utterly unaware they were admiring the instrument of their own destabilization. Manderly took the podium. "My friends," he said, his voice a warm, soothing instrument, "we stand amidst the artifacts of the past, but true art is the shaping of the present. What you see here is not destruction, it is revelation. It strips away the veneer, shows the city's true, vibrant, chaotic heart, and from that chaos, new order, true order can be born." It was a sales pitch for terror, and they were buying it. Cassian made his move. The lights flickered. Edward's back door. In the half-second of confusion, Cassian was gone from the floor. He was heading for Manderly's private offices. I followed, using the chaos to slip away.
I found him in Manderly's study, a room of rare books and stolen peace. He was at a computer, a data spike drive inserted. "He's not just a facilitator, Sterling," he said without looking up. "This data, it's a symphony. Each crime, each murder is a note. He's measuring the city's pain response." The door clicked shut behind me. Silas Manderly stood there, not alarmed, but intrigued. Two silent, large men flanked him. The wolf in my den, and his shepherd? How delightful. He looked at Cassian. "You're younger than I imagined. The loss of your father gave you such focus, such beautiful, destructive purpose. Adrian Thorne was a man who built bridges. You, my boy, are so much more interesting. You break things to see what's inside." "It ends tonight," Cassian growled, turning, his body coiling. "Oh, it's barely begun," Manderly smiled. "You see the data, but do you hear the music? The fear, the anger, the delicious paralysis? Gotham is my canvas, and you, Wolf, are just another splash of color, a very dark, very dramatic one." He nodded to his men. "Please, escort our guests to the sub-basement. We have special accommodations for art critics." The fight was short, vicious, and too loud. Cassian took down one guard with a shattered femur. I disarmed and disabled the other with a nerve strike, but Manderly was gone, a hidden panel in the bookcase swinging shut behind him. Cassian slammed his fist against the wall. "He's getting away." "No," I said, holding up my palm-sized scanner. "I placed a tracker on his champagne flute. He's heading for the roof, a private helipad." I looked at Cassian, the young man's face a mask of fury and pain. "Your 10 minutes are up. The police will be here. You need to disappear. I need to stop him. You will, by being smart. If you get arrested now, it's over. The data, Cassian, what did you get?" He hesitated, then yanked the drive free. "Everything. Bank routes, shell companies, a list of assets, and a location. A place called The Vault. He's not running. He's going to ground." Sirens wailed in the distance. I made a decision that would burn my bridges with control. "Go. I'll handle the police. Meet me at the coordinates for the old clock tower in 2 hours. We'll talk about the vault." He stared at me, conflict raging in his eyes. Then he gave a sharp nod and vanished out the window into the night. I stood in the ruined study, the sirens growing louder. I had let the primary target.
The old clock tower was a fossil in Gotham's ribcage, its gears stilled, its face blind. I arrived first, the data drive a lead weight in my pocket. The cold seeped through my coat. 2 hours later, a shadow melted from the rafters. Cassian Thorne, out of the armor, just a young man with the world on his shoulders. "Why?" he asked, the single word holding a universe of suspicion. "Because Manderly is right about one thing," I said, not looking at him, staring out at the sleeping city. "You break things to see what's inside. Sometimes that's the only way to find the rot. My employers, they want to contain the rot, to manage it. You want to cut it out. After a lifetime of containment, I find the latter refreshingly direct." He didn't buy it entirely, but he needed the intel. "The vault," he said, "it's not a bank, it's a research facility, owned by a subsidiary of Janus called Frostfire. It's off the books. The data mentions a lead scientist, Dr. Viktor Sable. The name meant nothing to me. A quick search on my secure tablet yielded a faded, decades-old scientific article from a glaciology journal. Dr. Viktor Sable, a brilliant cryobiologist, lost with his entire team on an expedition to a Patagonian glacier, presumed dead 20 years ago. "A ghost," I murmured. "Or a prisoner," Cassian said. "The data logs show regular massive power draws, enough to freeze a city block, and shipments of unusual chemicals. If Manderly and Kaleidoscope are interested, it's not for making better ice cubes." We decided on reconnaissance. 2 nights later, we approached the Frostfire facility on the industrial outskirts.
It was a nondescript, windowless cube of gray concrete, humming with deep, sub-audible vibration. The cold radiating from it was palpable, even from 100 yards away. Summer insects fell silent near its walls. Cassian went in through a maintenance duct. I provided overwatch from a nearby water tower, my scope scanning for patrols. There were none. The security was entirely automated. Motion sensors, thermal cameras, and strange nozzle-like employments on the roof. His voice crackled in my ear, tense. "Sterling, you need to see this. Sub-level 3. "What is it?" I asked. "It's a garden." He piggybacked a video feed to my monocle. The image that resolved stole my breath. It was a vast subterranean chamber, illuminated by a cold blue bioluminescence, and it was filled with ice. But not plain ice. This ice contained specimens. A saber-toothed tiger, perfectly preserved, its snarl eternal. A mammoth caught mid-stride. Dozens of creatures from epochs past, suspended in clear blue crystal. It was a museum of extinction. And in the center, connected to a forest of tubes and wires, was a massive cryo-chamber. Inside, visible through the frosted glass, were the silhouettes of a man and a woman, locked in an embrace, their faces twisted in silent agony. Dr. Viktor Sable and his wife, Anya. "He didn't get lost," Cassian whispered, horror in his voice. "He found something, and they took it from him. They've been keeping him here, using his research." "For what?" I asked, scanning the chamber schematics he was downloading. "What is the application?" The answer came not from the data, but from the facility itself. An alarm, silent but signaled by a shift in the deep hum. A section of the chamber wall slid open. A figure walked in. He was tall, gaunt, his skin had a bluish pallor, and he wore a lab coat over a sophisticated environment suit. His eyes, magnified behind thick goggles, were a feverish, intelligent blue. This was Dr. Sable, not dead, not a prisoner in the traditional sense, a man consumed. He went to a console and typed commands. The nozzles on the roof above us, outside, began to glow with an inner light. A fine, sparkling mist began to pour from them, drifting down over the industrial park. Where it touched, frost instantly bloomed on metal, and concrete cracked with a sound like gunshots. "He's weaponizing it," I said. "He's turning his prison into a fortress. He knows we're here." "I'm extracting," Cassian said. "There are people in the adjacent buildings, night shifts." He was right. The mist was spreading, a beautiful, deadly glitter in the night air, heading for a lit-up warehouse where workers were loading trucks. Cassian burst from a ground-level vent, not as the wolf, but as himself, shouting at the workers to run. The mist reached the first man. He gasped, a cloud of frost erupting from his lips. His skin turned gray, his movements slowed to a crawl as a rime of ice crackled over his jacket. He wasn't freezing to death, he was being flash-preserved. Cassian didn't hesitate. He slapped a small device on the wall of the Frostfire facility, a thermal charge. "Sable, listen to me," he yelled, his voice cutting through the unnatural quiet. "This isn't preservation. This is murder. Your work was meant to save. Anya wouldn't want this." On my feed, I saw the figure in the chamber flinch violently at the name Anya. His hands froze over the controls. "They told me she could be saved," a voice crackled over the facility's PA, Sable's voice, brittle and broken. "That my work could reverse the disease. They lied. They only wanted the weapon. The ice, it doesn't save. It remembers. It remembers every second of pain, every hope, every betrayal. It is memory made solid, and it is so very, very angry." The mist intensified, now a swirling blizzard centered on Cassian. He was being encased, his movements slowing. I took aim at the thermal nozzles on the roof. My rifle barked 3 times. 2 nozzles shattered, spraying coolant. The mist faltered. Inside, Sable was screaming, pounding on his console. "No, you don't understand. The ice is the only truth, the only thing that lasts." Cassian, half-frozen, lunged for the thermal charge's trigger. "I understand loss, Doctor, but this isn't honoring her. This is letting them turn your love into a monster." He hit the trigger. The charge didn't explode outward. It emitted a focused, intense heat pulse directly into the facility's main coolant line. Steam erupted from vents. The deep hum became a shriek of straining machinery. The ice in the chamber began to weep. Sable looked at the cryo-chamber holding his wife. The ice was melting. For the first time in 20 years, he would see her truly die. A sound escaped him, not of rage, but of utter, desolate grief. He typed one last command. The entire facility went into emergency shutdown. The mist dissipated. The blizzard stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Sirens approached. Cassian, shaking off shards of ice, looked at the facility. He's sealing it, burying it, and himself with it. We retreated as the first fire trucks arrived. From a distance, we watched the Frostfire cube sit silent and dark, a tomb for a love that had been twisted into a weapon. Cassian was shivering, not from the cold, but from the awful human tragedy of it all. "Kaleidoscope," he said, his teeth chattering. "They find your pain, your love, your genius, and they turn it into a tool. They don't just kill you, they pervert everything you were." I had no words of comfort. He was right. We had stopped a weapon, but we hadn't saved the man. We'd merely witnessed the final act of his destruction. The Curator's symphony had a new movement. A dirge played on a glacier's heart, and the cold certainty settled in my bones that Cassian Thorne was the next on their list to be twisted, broken, and repurposed. I had to prevent that, not for my mission, for the memory of a man who loved his wife, and for the boy who still loved his father.
The Frostfire incident changed things. A silent acknowledgement passed between Cassian and me. We were no longer hunter and prey. We were allies of desperate convenience. He had the raw, relentless drive of a force of nature. I had the training, the resources, and the cynical awareness of how deep the rabbit hole went. We began to meet regularly at the clock tower. I called him Thorne. He never called me Alfred. We were analyzing the Sable data when his phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his face, usually a mask of focused intensity, crumpled. It was a stark, human moment of vulnerability. "It's my mother," he said, his voice tight. "She's at Gotham General. There was an incident. A protest outside City Hall turned violent. Masquerade agitators." I drove. He sat in the passenger seat of my unremarkable sedan, silent, fists clenched. The wolf was gone, replaced by a scared son. We arrived at chaos. The ER was flooded. Through the crowds, we found Dr. Lynn Thorne in a curtained bay. She had a bandage on her forehead and a fiery anger in her eyes that outshone any injury. "Cassian," she said, grabbing his hand, her relief palpable. Then she saw me. Her gaze, sharp as a scalpel, took me in. "And you are?" "A friend, ma'am. Alfred Sterling. I work in security." "He's helping me, Mom," Cassian said, the lie smooth but strained. Her eyes narrowed. She knew her son. She saw the new shadows under his eyes, the hyper-awareness in his posture. She saw me, the old soldier with ghosts in his own eyes. She didn't press. She just held his hand tighter. "They're trying to scare us, Cass. They want us to hide. Your father," she took a shuddering breath, "your father believed in showing up, no matter how dark it got." It was a rebuke and a benediction. Cassian flinched. He'd been showing up, but as a specter of vengeance, not a beacon of hope. The contradiction was eating him alive. Later, in the quiet of the clock tower, he finally broke. She could have been killed because of what I'm doing, because I'm painting a target on everyone I love. He slammed his fist against a rusted gear. Kyle, Leo, Edward, Harvey, they're all exposed. Manderly knows who I am. It's only a matter of time. Then we use that, I said, thinking aloud. We can't hide them forever, but we can turn their connection to you from a vulnerability into a trap. We need to draw Manderly out, make him overplay his hand. He sees you as an emotional, reactive weapon, so be one. A plan, cold and ruthless, began to form. We would leak a false piece of intelligence, a supposed meeting between Cassian and a whistleblower from within Kaleidoscope. We'd make it irresistible, and we'd set the stage at a place of personal significance where Cassian's emotional response would seem authentic. The old veterans' arena, where his friend Kyle had once fought his most famous, losing battle. It's a huge risk, Cassian said. We're using my friends as bait. We're giving them a role in their own defense, I countered, with their consent and with a very large safety net. Getting their consent was the hard part. We gathered them in the back of Kyle's gym. Leo, the heart, Edward, the mind, Harvey, the ambition, Kyle, the soul. Cassian laid it out, bare and ugly. His secret, the wolf, Kaleidoscope, the Curator, the danger they were all in. The silence was profound. Then Leo laughed, a short, surprised bark. You're the wolf? Man, I owe Eddie $20. I said you were into some intense parkour. The tension broke, but the gravity remained. Harvey was furious. You dragged us into a war without telling us? Do you have any idea what this could do to my career? Your career? Kyle rumbled, stepping forward. Harvey, people are dying. Our city is being carved up. Careers? He looked at Cassian, his disappointment still there, but overlaid with a grim understanding. You should have told us, but you're telling us now. So what's the play? We explained the plan. Edward's eyes lit up with the technical challenge. Leo started thinking about arena access points. Harvey, after a long calculating pause, nodded. If this Manderly is as connected as you say, taking him down could be beneficial for the city. Always the politician. The trap was set. Edward created a flawless digital ghost, a disaffected Kaleidoscope data analyst with damning files. The meeting was set at midnight at the derelict arena. We positioned the friends as lookouts in strategic but actually heavily protected positions. I had a team of 3 former colleagues owed favors, providing unseen perimeter security. Cassian would be in the center, exposed, waiting. The night was moonless. The arena was a skeletal giant. Cassian stood in the center of the abandoned boxing ring, a solitary figure. I was in the rafters, a specter with a sniper rifle scanning the darkness. My earpiece buzzed with status reports from my team. All quiet. Then Manderly arrived, not with an army, but alone. He walked calmly down the concrete steps, elegant as ever, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. He stopped at the edge of the ring. Cassian, he said, his voice carrying easily. Or should I call you the Wolf? Such a direct name. I prefer the Curator. It implies care, selection. I didn't select you, but I must admit, you've become a fascinating piece in the collection. Where's the whistleblower? Cassian growled, playing his part. Oh, she doesn't exist, Manderly smiled. A delightful fiction, but thank you for the invitation. It's so hard to get a moment alone with you. You're always so busy. He looked around. And you brought friends. How touching. The loyal crew, the mechanic, the hacker, the politician, the fighter. A microcosm of Gotham's fragile ecosystem, perfect for a demonstration. My blood ran cold. He knows, I whispered into the comms. All teams alert. He's not here for the bait. He's here for them. Manderly raised his hand. Not a signal. He was holding a small, ornate remote. You see, Cassian, your father believed in bridges. I believe in pressure, in stress tests, to see what breaks first. Your city is one of my tests, and you are my most interesting variable. But to understand a variable, you must isolate it. You must remove contaminants. He pressed a button.
Nothing happened to Cassian, nothing in the arena, but in my earpiece, Harvey's voice from his position in the old press box was, "My chest," and Leo's, "I feel dizzy, man," and Edward's, just a gasp. It wasn't an attack, it was a revelation. The neurolace, I hissed to Cassian. From the masks, he didn't just use it on his foot soldiers. He's been testing it, refining it, and he's found a way to broadcast the signal, to induce cardiac stress, vertigo, neural disruption. He's weaponizing the city's own fear frequency. Cassian's composure shattered. "What did you do to them?" he roared, leaping from the ring. "I isolated the variable," Manderly said calmly, stepping back. "Now let's see what it does under true duress." Cassian charged. Manderly didn't run, he just smiled as 4 figures dropped from the shadows above, not Masquerade enforcers, but something else. Tall, silent, moving with an unnerving, coordinated grace. They wore advanced tactical gear, but their faces were obscured by smooth, featureless helmets, Kaleidoscope's own cleanup crew. The fight was catastrophic. Cassian was a whirlwind of rage, but these weren't thugs. They were a unit, anticipating his moves, using nets and sonic dampeners. He was overpowered, not by strength, but by perfect, cold coordination. I took my shot. My round took one of the operatives in the shoulder, spinning him around. It broke their formation for a second. Cassian used that second to break one's leg with a savage kick, but 2 others tased him with prods that delivered a voltage meant for elephants. He convulsed and went down. Manderly walked over, looking down at the twitching form of the wolf. Such passion, such waste. "Don't worry, Cassian. We have a special place for broken tools. We're going to help you reach your full potential, away from all these distractions." He nodded to his remaining operatives. They began to drag Cassian away. My team was engaged in firefights with other Kaleidoscope units outside. I was alone in the rafters, out of non-lethal ammo, facing a choice: reveal myself and likely die, or follow. I followed. They loaded him into an unmarked ambulance. I stole a motorcycle and tailed them, my heart a cold stone. They didn't go to a secret base. They drove to the newly built, publicly lauded Arkham Center for Urban Rehabilitation, a gleaming facility on its own island in the bay, praised for its progressive approach to criminal psychology, funded by anonymous philanthropists. The gates swallowed the ambulance. I stopped at the water's edge, watching the lights of the facility glitter like a false promise. They had him. The Curator had acquired his most prized piece, and I had led him right into the gallery. The guilt was an acid burn. I had to get him out. But Arkham wasn't a prison. It was a fortress built around a mind, and I just helped lock my ally inside.
Arkham Center. A monument to glass and light, designed to look like healing. From my rented boat in the fog-shrouded bay, it looked like a mausoleum. I'd been circling for 72 hours, using every satellite pass, every hacked traffic cam, every ounce of tradecraft to pierce its veil. Nothing. It was a black hole of data. Cassian Thorne had vanished into its sanitized corridors. My contacts were dry. Control had gone silent, likely reassessing my catastrophic deviation from protocol. I was officially a rogue asset. The only thread I had was the one Cassian himself had given me, the list of Kaleidoscope assets from Manderly's computer. One name stood out, a security consulting firm that had helped design Arkham's non-invasive restraint systems. I paid a visit to the firm's disgruntled former CTO, now drowning his regrets in a downtown bar. For a hefty sum and a promise of anonymity, he gave me schematics, not of the whole facility, but of the waste management system. Even fortresses have to take out the trash. 2 nights later, I was swimming through icy, foul water in a submerged outflow pipe. The schematics were correct. I emerged into a dimly lit sub-basement, a realm of dripping pipes and the hum of massive generators. The air was cold, sterile, smelling of antiseptic and ozone. I moved like a ghost, avoiding the few patrolling orderlies, men with the calm, vacant eyes of true believers. I found a terminal in a maintenance closet. Using decryption algorithms Edward had given me, I bypassed the basic security. I wasn't looking for Cassian's cell. I was looking for his file.
Patient 0017. Designation, Apex Predator Variant. Treatment, Cognitive Realignment and Capability Maximization. Doctor in charge, Dr. Eleanor Arkham. The logs were clinical, horrifying. Day 1, subject sedated, exhibits extreme resistance, neural mapping initiated. Day 7, subject's pain tolerance is exceptional, venom derivative infusion protocol begins. Day 14, subject's will remains unbroken, Prime is impressed. Day 21, physical augmentation surgeries commence, bone lacing, myomere weave grafts. My stomach turned. They weren't just breaking him, they were rebuilding him. Into what? I found a live feed, a cell, white and featureless. Cassian was inside. He was shirtless, his body a roadmap of new scars and subdermal implants. His head was shaved. He was sitting perfectly still in the center of the room, eyes open but seeing nothing. Then, as if sensing the camera, he slowly turned his head and looked directly into the lens. His eyes were no longer the fierce human eyes I knew. They were flat, dead, calculating. They were the eyes of a predator being taught to hunt on a leash. A voice, smooth and professional, sounded from behind me. Fascinating, isn't he? The human spirit's resilience. I turned, my hand going to my concealed pistol. A woman stood in the doorway, mid-50s, severe bun, white coat, glasses perched on her nose. Dr. Eleanor Arkham. She held a tablet, unafraid. "You are turning him into a weapon." My voice was dangerously quiet. "We're unleashing him. Society, sentiment, morality, these are restraints on a mind like his. We're removing the governor from the engine. Under Prime's guidance, he will become what he was always meant to be, an instrument of pure, decisive order." "Prime?" "You'll meet him. He's been eager to meet the shepherd of his new wolf." She tapped her tablet. The doors around me hissed shut. Vents in the ceiling released a sweet-smelling gas. My vision swam. The last thing I saw was Dr. Arkham's calm, academic smile. I awoke restrained in a chair, not in a cell, but in an observation room overlooking a larger chamber. In that chamber, shirtless and covered in a sheen of sweat, was Cassian, and facing him was a man. He was enormous, not from muscle, but from a sense of dense, implacable mass. He wore simple trousers and no shirt, his torso a landscape of old scars and a grotesque system of tubes and pumps embedded in his flesh, pulsing with a greenish fluid. His face was obscured by a heavy, muzzle-like apparatus. This was Prime, the ultimate product of the Arkham process. Again, Prime's voice was a distorted digital rumble. Cassian moved. It was the same blinding speed, but stripped of all style, all theatricality. It was pure, efficient kinetics. He struck at Prime. Prime didn't block. He absorbed the blows, his body barely registering them. Then he moved. It wasn't fast. It was inevitable. A single open-handed strike to Cassian's chest that lifted him off his feet and slammed him into the wall. You fight with anger. Anger is a fuel. It burns fast and leaves ashes. You must fight with purpose, with the cold certainty of geometry. Pain is data. Weakness is a structural flaw to be identified and exploited. Cassian pushed himself up, blood trickling from his lip. His dead eyes showed a flicker, the old fire, the defiance. Good, he was still in there. Prime saw it too. Ah, the variable. The contamination, your friends, your city, your father, these are the weaknesses we must excise. He turned and looked directly at the observation window, at me. But first, we must show you the cost of those attachments. He gave a signal. On a screen in the chamber, a live feed appeared. It showed Cale's gym. It was being raided, not by police, but by Masquerade enforcers. Cale was fighting, but he was overwhelmed, beaten to the ground. Leo's auto shop was in flames. Harvey's law office was being ransacked. Edward's apartment was a shambles of broken equipment. Cassian stared, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The dead eyes were gone, replaced by a horror so profound it was a physical wound. This is the world of attachments, chaos, pain, loss. We offer you a world of order, of strength without vulnerability. Join us. Become the solution, not another victim of the problem. Cassian looked from the screen of his friend's suffering to Prime, to the window where I sat, helpless. I saw the calculation in his eyes, the terrible weight of the choice. To save them, he'd have to become the thing that was breaking him. He lowered his head, his shoulders slumped. In a voice stripped of all hope, he said, "Stop, please, stop hurting them. I'll do whatever you want." Prime nodded, a gesture of satisfaction. Good. The first lesson is acceptance. I strained against my restraints, a roar of denial trapped in my throat. They had broken him not through pain inflicted on him, but through the threat of pain to others. They had weaponized his love. It was the cruelest cut of all. As orderlies came to take me away, I saw Cassian, head still bowed, being led from the chamber by Dr. Arkham. He was walking into the abyss, and I had failed to pull him back. The only light left was the cold green glow from Prime's venom tubes, and it illuminated a path not to salvation, but to a perfectly engineered damnation.
Time lost meaning in the White Room. They interrogated me, not with brutality, but with a chilling, logical precision. They knew who I was, who I worked for, what I knew. I gave them nothing. But it didn't matter. They weren't after information, they were after compliance. They showed me more feeds. Cassian undergoing therapy, virtual reality scenarios where he had to choose between saving a stranger and completing a tactical objective. He began choosing the objective. They showed him philosophical treatises on order versus chaos, on the weakness of democratic systems, on the efficiency of total control. He was being reprogrammed, synapse by synapse. I saw Prime again in my cell. He stood, a monument of silent power. "You cling to your old world, Mr. Sterling, a world of flags and loyalties that shift with the wind. You see him as a lost son. I see raw potential being refined. He will be my successor, the next Prime. Gotham will be his proving ground, and then the world." "He'll never be you," I spat. "He has a heart. You had yours surgically removed." A sound like grinding stones came from his mask, a laugh. "The heart is a pump. It fails. What we are building here is eternal. Watch." They put me in the observation room again. Cassian was in the chamber, now in a version of his wolf armor, but sleek, matte gray, stripped of the animalistic snarling aspects. It was sterile, functional. He was running an obstacle course, but it was a live exercise. The obstacles were other, patients, men driven mad by the Arkham process, feral, dangerous. Cassian moved through them with a chilling, machine-like efficiency. He didn't subdue, he destroyed. Limbs snapped, bodies fell, broken. He didn't pause. At the end of the course, a final obstacle appeared. It was a hologram, incredibly lifelike. It was his father, Dr. Thorne, holding out a hand. "Cassian, stop. This isn't you. This isn't what I wanted for you." Cassian froze. The machine-like precision faltered. For a long moment he stared at the ghost of his father. I held my breath. Then, slowly, he raised his arm. A weapon port opened in his wrist. "Sentiment is a flaw," he said, his voice flat, filtered. "You are a memory. Memories are data. Outdated data." He fired. The hologram shattered into pixels and vanished. In the observation room, Dr. Arkham made a pleased note on her tablet. Prime gave a single satisfied nod. My own heart broke. They had won. They had turned Cassian Thorne's love for his father into the final key to lock his own humanity away. I was deemed a failed experiment, a contaminant. I was scheduled for neural repurposing, a fancy term for mind wiping. My execution was set for the next day. That night, as I sat in the chilling silence, a tiny, almost imperceptible scraping sound came from the air vent. A small, folded piece of paper fluttered out. I grabbed it. In a tight, precise script I recognized from his engineering schematics, it read, "Generator C, South Wall, Thermal Bloom Pattern 351. Distraction in 120. Be ready. C." It was him, the old him, the part they hadn't reached. The defiance hadn't been erased, it had been buried behind the cold mask of compliance.
He had been playing the long game, learning their systems, waiting for a moment. Hope, a dangerous, painful thing, reignited in my chest. The next day, during a routine power transfer, as noted on the staff schedule Cassian had clearly memorized, the lights flickered. At precisely 120 seconds after the flicker, an alarm blared from the opposite end of the facility, a containment breach in the high-risk wing. The orderly outside my door cursed and ran. My door lock, keyed to the main grid, momentarily lost power. I was ready. I'd fashioned a shiv from a piece of my bed frame. I jammed it into the door mechanism as the power returned, preventing it from fully re-engaging. I squeezed out into the corridor. The facility was in controlled chaos. I moved toward the sub-basement, to Generator C. The south wall was a blank expanse of concrete. I had no idea what the thermal bloom pattern meant. Then I saw it. A barely visible heat imprint of a handprint on the wall in the shape of a 3, then below it a 5, then a 1. A passcode left by body heat. I placed my hand on the 3. Nothing. Then I remembered Cassian thought in sequences. I pressed the areas in order. 3 times, pause, 5 times, pause, once. A section of the wall hissed and slid aside, revealing a narrow service tunnel. I slipped in. I followed the tunnel to a junction. Cassian was there, not in the gray armor, but in a torn jumpsuit holding a stun prod taken from a guard. He looked at me, and for a fleeting second I saw the young man from the clock tower, scared and determined. Then the cold mask slid back. "The diversion won't last," he said, his voice low. "Prime is mobilizing. There's an emergency exit at the end of this tunnel that leads to the sea. A boat is prepped. Go." "You're coming with me?" "No." He shook his head. "They have my friends, their locations, their routines. If I run, they die. I have to stay. I have to finish this." "Finish what? Becoming him?" "Destroying him from the inside," he said, his eyes blazing with a fierce, desperate light. "I've seen the plans, Sterling, not just for Gotham, for other cities. Prime is the prototype. They're building an army of him. I have to be the one to stop it. I have to be here, at the source." It was a suicide mission, but it was his mission, the one he chose, not the one they programmed. "Then I'm staying too," I said. "You'll need a shepherd. Even a wolf needs backup." He almost smiled. It was a grim, cracked thing. "The boat. It has a console. Send the data packet it's loaded with. It's everything I've copied. Schematics, patient lists, financial trails. Send it to every news outlet, every government agency with a public inbox. Blow the whole thing into the light." Footsteps pounded in the distance. Prime's distorted voice boomed over the PA. "Patient 0017, you are malfunctioning. Return to your cell. This is your only warning." Cassian shoved a keycard in my hand. "Go, now. That's an order." He turned and ran, not away from the footsteps, but towards them. He was going to face Prime, to give me time. I ran the other way, my old bones protesting. I found the exit, a hatch that opened to a rocky shore. A small, fast, inflatable boat was tied there. I jumped in, fired up the engine, and shot out into the bay as the first shots echoed from inside the facility. I opened the console. There was the data packet, labeled simply, "The Truth." I hit send. As the boat bounced across the waves, I looked back at Arkham Center, its lights blazing against the night. Inside, a wolf was fighting a monster, not for vengeance anymore, but to prevent the creation of 1,000 more. The war was no longer for Gotham's soul. It was for the future of what it meant to be human, and the outcome was being decided in a hall of mirrors by a boy who refused to forget his father's face.
Gotham Bay was a choppy, ink-black mirror reflecting the distant fire. Not from Arkham Center, which stood silent and dark after the power grid failed, but from the Gotham Herald building downtown. My sent data packet had been a virus in Truth's clothing. It hadn't just contained files. It had triggered a cascade of fail-safes Edward had woven into it, overloading servers, triggering emergency broadcasts, and painting the digital sky with the sins of Kaleidoscope, the Curator at Arkham Center. The city was in an uproar, but my eyes were fixed on the dark island. No alarms blared, no sirens approached it. It was a vacuum of silence, and that was more terrifying than any noise. The final battle was happening in that void, and only one man would walk out. I guided the boat back to the island's rocky underside, to the exit hatch. It was still open. I went in, pistol drawn, moving through the now darkened, silent corridors. The only light came from emergency strips on the floor, painting a path to hell. I followed the sounds, not of battle, but of a terrible, methodical destruction. The crunch of composite armor, the shriek of tearing metal, the wet, final sounds of impacts on flesh. I found them in the central atrium, a vast space meant for patient socialization. It was a charnel house. Prime stood in the center, his venom tubes glowing fiercely, his chest heaving. Around him were the broken forms of his own cleanup squad, the advanced operatives, now just twisted heaps of gear and bone. And facing him was Cassian. He was back in his original wolf armor, but it was scarred, cracked, one of the wing-like veins sheared off. He was bleeding from a dozen cuts, one arm held at an awkward angle. But he was on his feet, and his eyes, visible through the shattered visor of his helmet, were fully, incandescently alive, not with rage, not with programming, with a cold, clear human will. "You have learned well," Prime's distorted voice grated. "You have shed your weaknesses. You are almost complete." "You're wrong," Cassian said, his voice ragged but strong. "I haven't shed them. I carry them. Everyone. My father's belief in bridges, my mother's courage, my friend's loyalty. Your mistake was thinking they made me weak. They're my foundation. They're why I get back up. You have nothing to stand on but your own hate." Prime charged. It was like a building falling. Cassian didn't try to meet force with force. He moved with it. He sidestepped, using Prime's own momentum, and drove the broken edge of his vein into the nexus of tubes on Prime's back. Green venom sprayed, sizzling on the floor. Prime roared, backhanding Cassian across the room. Cassian hit a pillar and slumped. Prime stumbled, the venom flow disrupted. His movements became jerky, uncoordinated. "You see," Cassian gasped, pushing himself up, "your strength is borrowed, a chemical lie. Mine is earned, through pain, through loss, through love. It's real, and it's stronger." He launched himself again. This was the fight at the Veterans Arena in reverse. Cassian was the tactician now, exploiting the flaw, the dependency. He was a surgeon, dismantling a machine. He struck pressure points, wrenched at tubing, used the environment. He wasn't trying to kill Prime. He was trying to shut him down. Prime, desperate, triggered a massive infusion. His body swelled, muscles threatening to burst from his skin, but the flow was erratic, poisoned. He became a chaotic, dangerous storm of power, but without control. He smashed pillars, tore up flooring, but he couldn't catch the smaller, determined figure dancing in his shadow. Finally, with a shriek of tearing metal, Cassian managed to rip the main venom reservoir from Prime's back. The giant froze, a puppet with its strings cut. He took 2 stumbling steps, then collapsed to his knees. The green light in his tubes faded to a sickly flicker, then died. Cassian stood over him, breathing heavily. Prime looked up, his mask cracked. For the first time, I saw his eyes. They weren't the eyes of a monster. They were the eyes of a tired, broken, deeply sad man. The bird," he rasped, his real voice thin and weak. "Did you ever see it? The bird of freedom." He wasn't talking to Cassian. He was talking to the ghost of his own father, to the island he betrayed, to the dream he sold for power. Then the light left his eyes. Prime was gone. Cassian stood there for a long moment, looking at the fallen giant. There was no triumph on his face, only a profound, weary sorrow. He had won, but he understood the cost of the battle for both of them. He turned and saw me. He gave a slow, exhausted nod. "We need to find the others, Manderly, Dr. Arkham, before they slip away in the chaos." We moved through the crippled facility. We found Dr. Arkham in her office, calmly packing a single suitcase. She didn't resist. "The experiment is concluded," she said, as if reporting a result. "Subject 0017 exceeded parameters. The data is invaluable." She looked at Cassian with something like professional admiration. "You are my masterpiece." Cassian ignored her, cuffing her to a pipe. We found Silas Manderly, the curator, in the main server room. He was trying to initiate a core meltdown, to destroy the evidence.
He turned as we entered, his elegant composure finally shattered, replaced by a petulant fury. "You ruined it," he shrieked. "The symphony. It was perfect. The chaos, the fear, the beautiful, terrible music of a society realizing how fragile it is." "It wasn't music," Cassian said, his voice quiet, final. "It was just noise, the sound of people hurting, and you're done conducting." Manderly lunged, not at Cassian, but at a red button on the console. I fired. My round took him in the shoulder, spinning him away. Cassian was on him, pulling him from the console, pinning him. Outside, the real world intruded, the sound of helicopters, of police boats, the cavalry, drawn by the data storm. Our time was up. Cassian looked at me. "Go. You can't be here when they arrive." "What about you?" "I have to face it. The truth. All of it. As Cassian Thorne. The wolf's work is done." He looked at the captured curator and the imprisoned doctor. "They'll face the system. A real one. Flawed, but real." I clasped his shoulder, the human gesture feeling foreign and right. "Your father would be proud. Not of the wolf, of the man who came back." He didn't answer, but his eyes glistened. I slipped away, back into the tunnels. As the first SWAT teams breached the main doors, I escaped into the dawn, leaving behind the island of broken minds and the young man who had chosen to heal his own, even as he saved his city.
The sun rose over a Gotham hung over with revelation. The news cycles were apocalyptic. Kaleidoscope exposed. City horror. Arkham Center a torture facility. Philanthropist Silas Manderly revealed as curator of chaos. Mayor Gillen resigned in disgrace. Commissioner Bullock was suspended. A special federal task force moved in. Cassian Thorne turned himself in. He gave a full, public testimony in a civilian suit, his face pale but steady. He confessed to being the vigilante known as the Wolf. He outlined his father's murder, his own descent into obsession, his war against the Masquerade, his captivity and torture at Arkham. He presented the data we'd sent, the evidence of Kaleidoscope's tendrils in government and business. He didn't justify his actions, he explained them. The city watched, breathless. The reaction was complicated. Some called him a hero, some a dangerous criminal. The DA, pressured from all sides, struck a deal. In exchange for his full cooperation and the dismantling of his wolf arsenal, all charges against Cassian Thorne were dropped. He was ordered to undergo mandatory psychiatric counseling. He was free, but he would never be anonymous again. I watched the press conference from the safe house, packing my few belongings. My work was done. Control had sent a terse, final message. Assets Sterling, contract terminated. Debrief waived. Consider yourself retired. Permanently. It was a dismissal, but also a pardon. They wanted me and my knowledge of their involvement to fade away. There was a knock at the door. It was Cassian. He looked older, the weight of the world now a visible mantle on his shoulders, but his back was straight. "They're putting my mother in charge of the Arkham Cleanup Committee, turning it into a real mental health facility. She says it's the only way to cleanse the stain." "A fitting role," I said. He hesitated. "Leo's shop is being rebuilt. Community fundraiser. Kale's running self-defense classes for the neighborhood. Harvey's using the scandal to launch a campaign for DA on an anti-corruption platform. Edward is helping the feds untangle Kaleidoscope's digital labyrinth. He says it's the ultimate riddle." "And you?" I asked. He looked out the window. "I don't know. The wolf, that part of me, it's in a cage, maybe forever. But the city, it's still sick. The wound is open, even if the poison is drained." He turned to me. "You're leaving. My time here is done. I have a daughter. I need to try and mend a bridge of my own." He nodded. "Thank you, Alfred, for not giving up on me, even when I was trying to. You reminded me what we fight for, not for orders, not for flags, for people, however flawed, however fragile. It was a lesson I'd forgotten." We shook hands, a formal gesture, between two soldiers who had shared a trench in a war no one else would ever fully understand. I left Gotham that afternoon.
I drove to a small town in Vermont. I stood outside a modest house with a well-tended garden. My hands trembled. I hadn't felt fear like this since my first firefight. I knocked. The door opened. Amelia stood there, a young woman now, her mother's eyes in her face. She stared at me, shock, anger, and a heartbreaking hope warring in her expression. "Dad?" That single word after years of silence was a key turning in a rusted lock. I had no grand speech. "I'm so sorry, Amelia," I said, the words utterly inadequate. "I'm home. For good, if you'll have me." She didn't hug me, not yet, but she didn't close the door. She stepped aside. "You'd better come in. It's going to take a while." As I crossed the threshold, my phone, tucked away in my pocket, buzzed once. A text from an unknown number. It was a single image, a child's drawing of a wolf standing protectively over a city skyline. Underneath, in Cassian's precise script, "The watch continues. Stay safe, old friend." I smiled, a real one, for the first time in years. In Gotham, the long night was over. Dawn had broken, harsh and revealing. The shadows were still there, of course, they always are. But now a different kind of guardian walked in them. Not a specter of vengeance, but a man who stared into the abyss, been broken by it, and chose to rebuild himself not as a weapon, but as a sentinel. His war was over. His work had just begun. And mine, in this quiet house with my daughter's uncertain smile, was just beginning too. Some bridges, my father once said, are built for aid, for defense, even offense. But the most important ones are built simply to connect, one fragile heart to another across the chasm of our mistakes. I finally understood what he meant.